And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Today we're taking a look at Tooth and Nail Factions. This is from Small Box Games, although, I mean, this still counts as a small box, but I notice it's a little bit larger than his previous small box. Maybe someday we'll have big boxes from, okay. Anyway, this is by John Claudius, and I'm just going to say right up front here, it has some of the nicest artwork I've ever seen in games. I'm really impressed with the animal artwork in this game. Is the game fun? Let's take a look. Tooth and Nail Factions comes with 7 factions, although one of them is a special faction and isn't used in the base game. That's a dog faction. But you have the Ian Walkers, you have the Enrodenta, the Marauders, the Pride, the Ostavoltura, and the Red Claw tribe. Each of these decks, like for example here, these are like dinosaurs. They're different creatures, but there's 5 different kinds of people in your deck, and there's 6 copies of each in the deck. So you're going to have a deck full of those, and that's the basic game. In the basic game, you'll take one of those. In a more advanced game, you will draft 2 of those, and you'll take some cards out of each of them, and then take the remaining cards and mix them together so that you have one deck. And then there's even a more advanced way of drafting. But either way, you're eventually going to have a deck, and then that will come with a special ability that you have. So, let's say I picked the Pride. Alright, so that's the deck that I'm going to use. So I put the Pride here in front of me, and now what the Pride has is I have a command area and a battle area in front of me. And I can send these people out to do one of 2 things. This Pride Elite, for example, I can put him in my command row, which will let him use this special ability, or I can put him out here in the attack row where he can do a point of damage. And most of the people in this game do 1 or 2 points of damage. There are also 2 different types of creatures in the game. Now, in this specific deck, in the Pride deck, they're all tech. That's the kind that they are. But there's also Arcana in some of the decks too. And so that type matters for a few things. Now on your turn, you're going to have a handful of cards start the game, and then at the beginning of your turn, you're going to draw another card into your hand. And you will also draw 1 action card. Now these action point cards are basically, you have a certain amount of points that you can spend per turn. Instead of keeping mind of that in your head, you just take cards. So you'll take 1 of them each turn, and then you can draw another card from your deck, or for each card that you have in your command row, let's say I have 2 cards there, I can draw another one. So if I did that, I would have 3 action point cards. And then I take my turn. I can play cards in front of me. I can play them in my command row, although I have a maximum of 3 cards that can be in my command row, or I can add them out here. And each time I do something like that, it costs 1 of these action point cards. I can also initiate an attack. I can initiate an attack with 1 of my guys out here, and I will turn them sideways in yet another version of tapping. In this game, it's called Drained and Recharging instead of Tap and Untap. But so I can turn 1 of these over and attack my opponent with this creature for an action point. If I do so, they will do that much damage. However, if I have a card in my hand that matches that, I can discard that card for an extra point. That's a normal attack. I also, however, can do a formation attack. If you see here at the top, Scorched Earth, that means I can attack with exactly 2 tech creatures. If I do so, I will also remove the top 2 cards of the opposing player's discard pile from the game. So what I can do is, when you attack somebody, you are attacking their pile, and they will lose cards out of their pile, because if you get rid of their pile, then you've won the game. And there's kind of like 2 discard piles in this game. There's a discard pile, but there's also removed from the game. However, this is probably the most least removed from game I've ever seen. What I mean by that is there are many cards which say bring a card that was removed from the game back into the game. Well, if you can do that, then it really wasn't removed from the game. But whatever. I guess that's better than saying discard pile A and discard pile B. But anyhow, so you can attack with 2 people and get those bonuses. You also have a special ability that your people have. Now, another thing you can do for free is you can tap one of these command people and use their special ability. Like, for example, this guy can destroy 1 Arcana troop in the opponent's player's war zone. Or this Pride Infantry, put the top card of an opponent's player's deck on the bottom of your deck. The Pride Infantry. When you do that, you are going to lose them, though, unless you can discard a card from your hand that matches the same one that you just drained here. At the beginning of your turn, you'll undrain all your command people, but you can only undrain one of the guys out here in the middle of the field. So if you're going to make more attacks, you're going to have to be careful in how you spread them out. And that's basically it. You go back and forth trying to destroy your opponent's deck. Now, I already mentioned that you can mix 2 decks together. If that happens, you can have 4 in your command row and 8 out here, which gives you a chance to get more of these cards to do things with. There's also a small faction, the Dogs of War, and if you want to play with these, you can take 1 set of the dogs, you pick which ones, and you draft them in your hand, and they can come out there and they can count as a wild troop. They can go out and fight for you, but they also have reaction abilities where they can basically react to something your opponent does, and they add some more variety to the game. But games are pretty short. You can play a 2-player game or a 3-player game. If you play a 3-player game, as soon as 1 player is eliminated, the player who has the most cards in their deck is the winner. So here we have this game, Tooth and Nail Factions. Okay, I'm going to start out by saying this. I do not like the 3-player game. It just doesn't work very well. This is at its best with 2-player. It's also at its best by playing, in my opinion, with the drafting rules. Although the drafting rules do take a little bit longer, and so then I might play with just to take the 2 decks and mix them. That's very good too. The single deck is okay, but it feels very basic. Now that leads to what could be considered to be a problem with the game, and that's that the game feels very basic. And it's not really, but you're not going to run into some, wow, look at that combo I just did. They're really not here. There's really only a few things you can do on your turn, and yes, you can do and outsmart your opponent and play cards, and you have to make decisions on whether to discard the extra card from your hand for the extra point, how fast to draw cards from your deck, what combinations. But if you play with the drafting, a lot of your game comes from that drafting point, which is fine by me because drafting is something that I enjoy. I said that the artwork is great. I really think it is. I really enjoy all the different creatures we have here. A gang of wolves, and I like here there's a walrus shaman, and then just really nice artwork and really fun, and a lot of different special abilities, but nothing that's overwhelming. Now that might be good for some people, because some people don't like to play Magic where the other person goes, oh, I just hit you for 16 points of damage and 4 more and you're dead. This one, that's not going to happen because you're not really getting hit with too many points of damage. There is some kinds of themes where some of the creatures are being brought back from the dead. And aside from the silliness of being removed from the game and then yet it comes back in the game, okay, but that's just semantical, I suppose. But it does work well. It's a little sedate for me. By what I mean is when I play it, it's enjoyable, but I never feel very tense during it because I know my opponent can't do that much to me on his turn. He certainly can get ahead in the game, and I try to catch back up. But it's almost like a Euro collectible card game, well, without the collectible card game parts of it. But it almost feels like a more balanced Magic the Gathering, and that's really what it's going to feel like—a very balanced, basic Magic the Gathering. And so I enjoyed it. I don't love it. I wouldn't want to play it all the time, but I wouldn't be opposed to it, again, as long as I play with 2 players. Because the 3-person dynamic, it's like, same reason I don't like playing 3-player Magic the Gathering or 3-player Warlords or things like that, because the dynamic is just not as good. Well, you could play 4 players with teams, and that would work just as well as 2 players. So that's basically my thoughts on the game. Will you be interested in it? It's basically, look at what I just said. If you say, oh, all these special abilities, these things I have to remember. No, you don't. There's no keywords on cards. It's not a confusing game. But if you do play, throw in the Dogs of War, throw in the two factions, and you'll have a really interesting, and each game will be very different. In fact, I would compare this game very similar to the Smash Up from AEG that's come out recently. They're on that same kind of level. While Smash Up is over the top silliness, this game takes itself a little bit more seriously, but if you think about it, it is kind of silly because, you got dinosaurs fighting rats. But they're on that same level with just there are differences between them. So there you go. I keep forgetting the name, Tooth and Nail. I want to call it Tooth and Claw or Claw and Nail. Tooth and Nail factions.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find the latest board game news at Dicetowernews.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Fun Again Games, the world's best game source. Fun Again Games has over 5,000 games available. Check them out at funagain.com.
Shut the door!
That's right. Shut it.
There.